Okay, let's continue, and we want to talk about the files. Well, in the real world, a lot of data will stay in files, and even though we are able to get some data if we ask the user to type something, well, if we are able to read files, and then all of a sudden we can get a lot more data from the files, right? And then, well, we have in Python we can open files before we can really read or write. So open the file is the first step. And usually after we have done everything we want to do with the file, we want to close the file too. Okay, and then to open a file, and we want to do open and then the file name. And if we do a code R, and that is for read, so we open a file for reading. And if we want to open a file for writing, and then that is open a file and then with the W. And eventually after you finish touching the file, you want to close that, and then you have to do a file variable, and that is the file variable you have created when you open the file, and then you do a dot close to open that. So dot close. Okay, and before we move on to see more code, we want to understand the file path. And for the file path, it means, for example, in Windows, our files do not just stay all together. They are staying in different drives and then in different folders, and then the folder inside folder inside the folder inside folder, right? And for example, for this for this file I'm presenting, that's in the G drive, Dropbox, and then CSV131 and the notes, and then 16 files.pbtx. So this is a standard format of a file path in Windows. However, if you're using a Mac, and it should look something slightly different. Okay, and then when we are talking about the file path, there are really two different things we're talking about. Well, the number one will be the absolute path, and we are telling the operating system where can I find this file, either from the root if you're using a Mac, or from a specific drive, for example the drive G. So and then we give the file folders, and then the second level file folders, and we go on and on and on, and then until we say okay, that is the file. So you start from either a drive or the root. That's called absolute file path. And if you want to do a relative file path, and that is from the current.py file in the same folder or in the folder deeper inside. So we are not telling the Python where can we find the file from the root or a drive. We are using the current location of the current.py file as a start point. Say if we are standing in this folder, and then inside the current folder there is another file name, I just specify that file name, and that's good enough, because the file I'm trying to touch and the .py file I'm writing right now, if they are in the same folder, and then tada, I just specify the file name, and then I can find it. Okay, so well, in this lecture and most of the time, then we are gonna try to use the relative file path just to make our lives a little bit easier. And to read a file, as we say, we want to open a file, and then we also want to specify what's the purpose of this file, and say if you want to open this file, and then open parentheses, the first parameter should be the file path, but say this data.txt is in the same folder as my current.py file, and then I can just specify the file name because I'm using the relative path, and then I'm writing the R saying that is the file I'm trying to read. So I'm created this file object. I call that a file reference. And then later, if I want to read this file, I'm going to use this variable file reference. But for now, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to open this file for reading purpose, and then immediately I want to close that. So I want to do file reference dot close, and then parentheses, and then I got this file reference closed. Okay, and well, now the next question will be, how about we want to read some of the lines? Say, well, for the file reference, I open this file again, and then I'm assuming that for this data.txt, I have this content inside. So that is Yang, comma, Song, computer science, and then Mark, lemmas, statistics. And those are two professors in our university. And then I want to do a for line in file reference. What is that? This syntax sounds really familiar, right? That is the same syntax we use to visit a string character by character. We talk about that when we are talking about the iterations in strings. And what else? If we have a list, and then we can use almost the same syntax to visit all the members of the list one by one, right? And we talk about this in the list. Okay, now we know for the file reference, since we open that for reading purpose, and then it will just be considered as a sequence of the lines in the file. So if we want to read the file line by line, and we can do for line in the file reference, and then inside the body of the iteration, I'm printing each line once. So I read a line from the file reference, I print that, and then I move back so I can read the next line. So this is a simple code that we can read all the content of a file line by line. And let me play with this code a little bit and say, I want to create a file. Say I want to create a file called data.txt. Okay, so the data file is here, and then I want to do Yang, Song, comma, CSC, and then Mark, lemmas, comma, STC. Okay, and then I guess I'm gonna be okay with that, and after that I'm gonna do a file ref equals open, and then I want to specify the data.txt, and then comma r, and then I do for line in file ref, and then print line, and then eventually I want to do file ref, file ref dot close. Okay, and then ideally I should got both two lines printed. Am I doing that correctly? And yes, but here is one thing. Well, when you are doing the print, well, by default, remember Python will do a line break. And when you are reading a line here, you also have a line break. Well, it is hidden, but well, how do we tell it is the end of the line? We have a line break. So in this file, when we are reading a line, there is already a line break. And then by doing a print, we are adding one more line break. That's the reason that we have a line break here. We have another line break here because, well, there is a line break for after at the end of each line of the source data. So if we do not want to have one extra line, we can do and equals like this. So well, we are saying, okay, after printing a line, you don't have to add a line break because there will be a line break we have already read from the line. Okay, so if I run this version again, and you will see the extra line breaks are gone. Okay, so let me come back here. And the next thing, well, if the file is a CSV, and CSV is a for comma separated values, and then we can do even more because we know commas are used in the file as the delimiter. And after we read the line, and then we can do a split. And by doing a split, we are separating Yang and Song and computer science into three parts. Okay, we read a whole line, Yang, comma, Song, comma, computer science. But now if we want to do a split by comma, what do we have? We have a list of 3 strings. That is Yang as the first member, Song as the second member, and computer science as the third member. And after that, I'm going to put that into values. So for the values, we have 3 members. We have a list of the 3 members, and they are all strings. And after that, I want to print the value 0, which should be Yang, and value 1, which should be Song, and then is a professor in, and eventually the last part, which is computer science. So by reading the first line and then do a split by comma, and after that I can print this line as Yang Song is a professor in computer science. And after that, I can read the next line. And the next line, I have the Mark, Lammers, statistics. And after doing the split and the print, I'm going to have Mark Lammers is a professor in statistics, right? So that is the cool thing about CSV, because we are going to make use of the feature of the CSV, so we can use the comma as a delimiter and then separate different pieces of the information. Okay, and here is another way that we can read the lines, and that is we can use a while loop. And the setup of this problem is a little bit different. So we open the file and then we want to do a read line. And for the read line, it has a hidden cursor. When we open the file, the cursor will start at the very top of this file. And then when we do a read line, we read the current line, and we also move the cursor down by 1. So the setup will be, we open the file, we read the first line, and then as long as this line is still valid, it's not empty. Okay, and then we want to do a split, and then we want to do a print, and eventually we want to read the next line. And again, when we are doing the read line, we read the line, and then the hidden cursor will move down 1 step. So as long as there is still a valid line, we are gonna try to split, do the print, and then we read one more line, and then we move the cursor down. And when do we finish? When the cursor is already at the very end of this file, we try to read the file again, and then we got nothing read because that's already end. And then while line will be considered as a false, so this iteration will finish eventually. So for this file and the file we have seen here, they are exactly the same. So it is similar to how do we do a iteration to visit all the members in the list with for loop and a while loop. And you guys should know how to do both of them, right? And now here is another question. How do you read the file line by line with a for loop? How do you make a while loop to read the file line by line? And then you should know both of them. Okay? And well, I'm going to pause the video here, and next video we are going to talk about how can we write into a file.